Hello everyone, my name is Sikkil Gurucharan and I'm really happy to be presenting this short conversation on text and performance in Indian music right from this hot and happening city of Dubai. Along with me is Sruthi Ramesh, young singer, and it's really a pleasure for us to be presenting this conversation as part of the Peruvanam International Village Festival that took place earlier this year in February. Shruti, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me here with you. So to get straight into the conversation, I think I'll get into the first question.
Sure.
So now we all know that music is one of the most celebrated art forms in today's world. Would you say that Indian classical music can be considered a science as well as an art? And if so, how?
Yeah, as you rightly said, the moment we talk about music, anywhere in the world, people associate that with art. So, because music has the tendency to touch people's hearts, and anything that can touch people's hearts should be an art. That's what people generally think. So, but the more you realize the intricacies of this wonderful art form, the subtleties involved, you find that there is a lot of scientific technique that has to happen even before you become an artist.
Right.
So, since you're a student of music, the moment you started learning music, you would have approached things from a very scientific point of view, as in you would have diligently took a paper and a pen, written down the songs, the names of the ragas, the talas, how the tala goes, what is the structure of the arohanam, avarohanam, everything.
Yeah.
And then once you started giving concerts, you'll find that there is something more that goes beyond the textbook. So once you get into the performance aspect of music, you try to grasp the concepts of art in this wonderful music form. But as a student, I think all of us continue to remain as students even after we become performers. So as a student, day in and day out, we have to keep updating ourselves, just like the iOS and the Android systems. Every year, we have to keep updating ourselves according to the new ragas that we probably didn't even, we were not aware of its existence earlier. So there are so many old and ancient ragas that still we are learning right now. Yeah. So all those aspects, the scientific aspects where you diligently go and search for something new and find out if the structure of the raga is something that it works even today, and applying those techniques to the world today, the music world today, and finding out whether that can be transformed into a performing art, transformed into a performance when you are singing a concert. So all those scientific techniques also has to happen. So I would like to say, just like Kamal Hassan in this movie Dasavadaram, he has a very comical dialogue saying, are you a scientific terrorist or a terrific scientist? You know, in that movie. Like that, I would like to say that all musicians, we are like scientific artists and artistic scientists. So it's a beautiful mix of both text and performance. They are hand in glove in this wonderful Carnatic music art form. But you have to understand that the switch between text and performance happens seamlessly.
Right.
And it happens in a manner that you will be able to appreciate only after you have crossed a little distance as a scientist in music form.
So with everything that you said, right, can one say that text is essential for a student and performance techniques evolve as they become an artist?
Absolutely. So to take you back to my learning days, I still continue to learn, but the moment I was introduced to this art form as a student, just like you, I would be very thrilled to take up my notebook and do all those double line in the margin. And we want that book to be, it has to look appealing to us as a student, right? That's what you do, and you put the fancy cover on that notebook and bind it and all these things. So little things that gives you joy, because setting up the apparatus itself is the starting point of any scientific experiment.
Definitely.
So when you're approaching music as a scientist, you want to have all your handy apparatus ready. So, and then when my guru started teaching me music, so now in 2023, I can safely say that there are different types of gurus. But I think earlier, probably in the 1980s and 90s even, a lot of Carnatic music lessons in the classrooms happened orally, and we had to rely mainly on the oral technique as well as the oral technique. So whatever they sing, we have to listen. So a lot of importance is given to the voice and the ears not as much as the eyes and your hands.
Interesting.
So the moment you start learning, at least the moment I started learning in the early 90s, it was not, it was not common practice for me to write down the songs in front of my guru.
Right.
But now things have changed because the students wish to write the song as we are learning.
Right.
And there are many comments about the ragas, the talas, and everything is written down in a very scientific way. It's marked for posterity. But in those days, I think whatever they sang, we used to literally even close our eyes sometime and repeat it.
Right.
And they would listen to it and correct us. So that's how music lessons happened. So I think in those days it was not as scientific as it is right now.
Okay, interesting.
But once the class is over, we used to go and write the entire song, and there was no internet those days. So we used to refer to a material that was available, just like the dictionary in English language. We used to have several textbooks of music and the notation, and we'll come to notation a little later. But the first thing for us to write down was the lyrics of the song. So write down the lyrics, and then the raga, the thala, and the composer, and read a little bit about the raga, read a little bit about the thala and the composer. And the more you dwell into these aspects, you invoke the scientist within you.
Interesting.
You sing just like you were taught in your early days.
Right.
If you have accomplished the lesson as taught by a teacher, that's all was required by you. But the more number of songs you learn, and then the artistic streak in you develops. So that's where text translates to performance. So just like you repeat the same experiment 100 times, the outcome is going to be the same unless you deviate from the prescribed steps.
Definitely, yeah.
In music, the same thing happens. If you repeat a song 100 times, the result is going to be the same. But because this is the matter of the heart and the mind, your mind will definitely invoke the creative streak in you. Maybe the 50th or the 52nd time, it will automatically ask you to sing a certain sangadi or a certain part of the song in a different way. It's likely to challenge you, saying that, can we do this also in this way?
Right.
And that's again, you sing that to the guru, your teacher, and he or she may correct it or may not correct it. They may say that this is going against the text. You probably have to bring it back to the text, because in Carnatic music, the text is very sacred.
Right.
The song that we sing, as you know, Indian classical music, especially South Indian classical music, is a lot dependent on the compositions.
Definitely.
So we have Varnams, Kritis, Swarajatis, Tillanas, Tirupugal. You know how many songs, how many kinds of songs we have. So even in a performance, we are not allowed to change the form of the text. So that's very sacred.
Right.
So you don't go, unless it's your composition, in which area you can do whatever you want. But if it's a composition that is existing, you don't change that. So you have to stick to the text. But singing that same text 100 times, the 60th time, you will develop an idea of how to perform the text rather than how to sing it. So you become a performer at that point.
Interesting.
So as you said, the moment you start learning Carnatic music, you are more of a scientific student. The more number of songs you have learnt, the more number of hours you have spent in learning that song, learning those details around those songs, you start becoming an artist.
Interesting. So, stringing along from what you said previously, can we have some examples of how Kalpana and Kalpita Sangeetam would help a performer?
I'm glad you asked, because according to me, music can be better explained by demonstrations rather than just discussions. So it will help the viewers also. Since you're also a student of music, I think it will be nice if you can also join along.
Definitely.
Just to travel along the journey of how Kalpana and Kalpita Sangeetam play a very important role in a student's life. As you know, Kalpana Sangeetam is based on your creativity, and Kalpitam is all that you learned in the classroom.
Right.
So Kalpita means what has been taught in the classroom. Kalpana is what you have created, what you have improvised upon.
Interesting.
So the step to attaining Kalpana Sangeetam is Kalpita Sangeetam. Only through Kalpitam you can get to Kalpana.
Right.
Just like these two dual sides, in Carnatic music you also have something similar, which is called as Lakshana and Lakshya Sangeetam.
Right.
Lakshana is singing according to the structure,
Right. Okay.
knowing what the raga does, and what is the mood of the raga, what are the swaras of the raga, what are the do's and don'ts of that specific raga. And then the more you learn about the lakshana of the raga, your lakshyam or your aim to project that raga in your own way, it develops. So lakshana gives rise to lakshyam. So lakshana, you can say that it's more close to the textual references you have in Carnatic music. Lakshyam is towards the performance. Kalpitam is text. Kalpana is performance.
Interesting.
So this beautiful amalgamation happens seamlessly in Carnatic music. So let's see. Let's take a famous ragam, say Harikamboji, Mela number 28. So the text of this raga, if I were to make you sit and write in a very diligent and scientific way, I would say that note down that this is the raga number 28 of our 72 Melakarta system. And then I go on to tell you what is the 72 Melakarta system, in which century did it roughly originate, and who was behind this Melakarta system. And I have to tell you all that, and then go on to explain how this 72 gets split into two as 36 and 36. You know what I'm talking about. 36 are Shuddha Madhyama ragas, and the other 36 are Prati Madhyama ragas. So the first 36, in which you have 28, which is Harikamboji. And after doing all this, which I would sincerely hope that you have written it down in your classroom, and then I go on to give you the Arohanam, Avarohanam, which is the first step to understanding any raga. The first step in Kalpitam is to understand what is the Arohanam and the Avarohanam of the raga first.
Interesting.
So Harikamboji, Mela number 28, I would say that the Arohanam Avarohanam is thus, and I sing. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa.
Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa 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 ni da pa ma ga re sa.
Very good. So I will ask you to repeat this many number of times for you to get accustomed to how the Arohanam Avarohanam works in this raga. And then, according to me, the transition from text to performance happens even in the elementary stage in a classroom, in a very little way, but a very fundamental and important way, which is the introduction of gamakas. Even today, gamakas are a very scientific aspect. At the same time, they have a lot of improvisation element into it. So if you listen to me singing Harikamboji on one particular day, 1 week later, you may not find the same gamakas that I'll probably deviate a little more from the gamakas. So it's very difficult to pinpoint the exact gamakas that I'm singing. You can pinpoint the swaras, but not the exact gamakas. Although I should tell that there are many people, especially the famous music composer Ramesh Vinayagam sir, who is doing excellent work by notating even the gamakas through a technique called gamaka box. So he is introducing that to a lot of music students all over the world for the benefit of music students, so that they can actually mark the gamakas while writing the song itself through the gamaka box. It's a beautiful scientific technique we have to learn and find out if it's applicable to us in our musical careers as students as well as musicians. So coming back to gamakas, where it's the actual point of shift from text to performance, because your creativity begins, how you handle the gamakas begins at that point. So I ask you to sing Harikamboji now with gamakas. It will be sa re ga ma
sa re ga ma.
So I actually did sa re ga. My idea was to give ga re ga for that ga. The gamaka was that way, but you gave only sa re ga. You were happy to stay plain on that ga. So that's where, what I mentioned before, it is demonstrated, because gamakas, it's very intrinsic. I feel that gamakas have to be pushed in one particular way at one particular moment, and you may or may not feel it, may or may not be right also. So we learn a lot through trial and error with gamakas. And then pa da ni sa sa ni da pa magare sa. So let me sing it again. You'll find that there'll be a different set of gamakas that I give now. Sa re ga ma.
Sa re ga ma.
Padani sa
Padani
sa ni da pa
Sani da pa
ma ga re sa
ma ga re sa
ma ga re sa.
re sa.
So now you find two different sets of gamakas. All gamakas are given in the musical texts. There are like 10 different gamakas that people usually commonly give. It's called Dashavida gamakas.
Right.
So what we sing will probably be within this 10, but what gamaka to use where, that depends on the artist's creativity at that given point, depending on the song, depending on the pace of the song, depending on his or her ideas for that raga on that particular moment.
Interesting.
So gamakas, it determines a lot on how the performance is going to move also.
Right.
Some people may choose to sing a lot of gamaka oriented songs. Some people may choose to give less gamakas and concentrate on faster brigas and sangadis that move fast, so that they want the excitement of the concert to be in a direction which is more speed based.
Right.
Some people want a lot of meditative or contemplative mood in the concert. They rely on a lot of these gamakas drawing out the swaras. So the creativity is influenced by the choice of gamakas that you make. So let's move from the mela number 28 to a derivative raga of 28, a Janya raga.
Right.
And you see how text and performance will appear from this.
Right.
Let me sing Kedara Gauda. Sa re ma pa ni sa
Sa re ma pa ni sa
sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. So this is just the same Harikamboji while coming back, but while going, you actually will note that it's more of Madhyamavati. Sa re ma pa ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. But this is only this is only Kedara Gauda on paper. On text, you write this as Kedara Gauda, and you give the structure of the raga, or the lakshana of the raga as SRMPNS, which is Sarima Panisa.
Yeah.
That's it. But while performing, even going for the first song in Kedara Gauda, you'll find that a lot of performance related techniques come because of the gamakas. So if I sing Kedara Gauda like this, what we did now, nobody will accept. This is not Kedara Gauda. So we are actually going against the very lakshana of Kedara Gauda. So in these kind of ragas, you have to rely more on the performance techniques. We have to rely more on the songs that are available in Kedara Gauda, which give us a substantial scientific base, database, in order to understand how the raga itself functions. So the lakshyam will actually determine the lakshanam for these ragas. So it is the performance will enhance the text. So it's a beautiful give and take curve that happens between text and performance on a day-to-day basis. So Kedara Gauda, the way it has to be sung will probably be Sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa saraguna palim pa samaya murani ko. All these melody phrases that I just rendered, if you're going to write it in your classroom in a textbook, it will just be ma pa da pa papa magarisa, ma pa da pa papa magarisa, ni sa ri sa 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 ni da pa ni sa ri. This is all is going to appear on your textbook.
Right.
And there are certain signs that you give to denote the downward slide, the upward slide in certain ragas. This is what I think Gamaka box is trying to replace. They will actually tell you how that Gamaka is going to go. But even today, Gamaka is a largely oral technique that you have to learn. You have to listen to your teacher, listen to your contemporaries, or listen to the legends from yesteryears who have handled this raga so well to understand how this raga moves. So upon repeated listening, upon learning kritis from my guru, you found that it's actually going to be ma pa da pa, ma pa da pa. But you're going against the text because the text only has ma pa. Where does it go after ma and pa? in Kedaragola,
Dapa.
ma pa, in the aronam, it goes to sa re ma pa, and then yeah, blanking out.
Kedaragola.
Ipo sonnene.
Oh, sari mappa
Nisa.
Nisa.
So, so in your text, you would have written it as sa re ma pa, and then
Nisa.
Nisa. But now I am asking you to sing ma pa da pa, which is actually, to a young mind, it will confuse them. It will say, am I not supposed to go from ma pa to ni? Why are we going ma pa da pa? It sounds like Harikamboji, but no. The structure or the lakshana of Kedara Gaula is determined by these gamakas. It's a beautiful way where you understand more about the text through the performative techniques. Ma pa da pa 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 ma ga re re sa ni sa re sa 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 ni da pa ni sa re. If I give this in a different way, it won't sound like Kedara Gaula.
Right.
Ni sa re sa 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 ni da pa ni sa re. It will sound very plain and against the Kedara Gaula's lakshana. So what I'm trying to say here is lakshana, lakshyam, kalpita, kalpana. The movement from text to performance, it has to happen only after you have learnt enough songs in a particular raga. So just think of raga as a set of aronam, avaronam, an ascending scale and descending scale, and then you add the gamakas in between those little notes. As a famous musician once said that Western classical music relies on the notes, whereas Carnatic classical music relies what is in between the notes. What is in between the notes? The gamakas. So gamakas, they define what Carnatic music is. So for understanding Carnatic music, you have to understand the gamakas, and only if you move from the text through the gamakas, you will be able to find your foot as a performer. And while you are a performer, you will understand the artistic nuances that come with the raga. And the world of talas is a little different because, as you know, time involves a lot of regulation. Time regulates human life. Right? If there was no time, everything would be arbitrary, random. There won't be any end. So we need a full stop after every avartanam. Even in our sentences, we need full stop or some time cycle to end and again begin. Time is cyclical. It moves in a loop, but it has to end for it to start again. So just like that, tala is more scientific. You cannot improvise in a tala, but you can improvise with raga, but the tala will always be regulated. It will determine whatever you're improvising, it will determine in a yardstick fashion. Tala will help you stay on one path. Whatever you're improvising within that song, it can happen, but the tala has to be maintained. So there is no improvisation or an artistic exploration of talas unless, again, you want to create a different tala. But then again, it sets. Once you create a tala, you cannot change the tala. But once you create a raga alapana, the raga alapana will change. Because the text of the raga will immediately transform into a performance through gamakas. And every performance, a raga, how it is sung differs. So if you ask me to sing Harikamboji half an hour from now, I'll be singing it in a different way. Kedara Gaula 1 hour from now, it will sound different. Because of the gamakas that are present within it. And the raga alapana, it has so much of last minute emotions that an artist may or may not feel on the stage. There is so much of rich dialogue happening between the artist's mind and heart when it comes to the ragas. So all these are performance based. So from text, you have to move to performance.
I actually have one question, which is not. So would you say, now we spoke about, you were telling about how tala makes music or the theoretical part of music more scientific. It's more objective as opposed to ragam or raga alapana or anything with relation to creation. It makes it more subjective thing. So now when you take music, right, raga and tala make music as a whole. Would you say music is a more objective art or it's a more subjective art?
Beautiful. I love this play of duality because we started with text, performance, lakshana, lakshya. Now you're asking whether it's an objective or a subjective art. Again, it moves from objective to subjective and it comes back to objective. You need, see, that's why I think artists make this world a better place because they know how to be in the middle of things. They hopefully they know how to analyze things from a neutral standpoint, because they work with these dualities, the two extremes every day. They need to know about their art form from a subjective point of view, and then they need to connect with an audience who are all individuals having their own tastes and preferences, and they need to become a very objective artist. So it's a beautiful play of both objectiveness and subjectiveness in music. So you have to learn the songs in your classroom, go to your teacher, learn more songs, learn more about the ragas, and practice. Practice is what actually makes you a better performer. Because as I said, the more number of times you sing, even the Harikamboji, Aronam, Aronam, Kedaragula, Aronam, Aronam, with those gamakas, if you sing it 100 times every day, I can guarantee that in a week's time, you will be able to have a rich idea of how to create certain phrases in Harikamboji yourself. Whether you are able to sing it or play it well, that's a different question. But the ideas will come to you the more you practice certain thing again and again. So all these things are subjectiveness. You have to do it for yourself. And the moment you start performing, you find that, well, you're going to sing for an audience in a concert. You're going to sing along with a team of artists who are individuals in their own regards. They have their own views and opinions about ragas. And there is when the art becomes objective. You need to start sharing your art, sharing your ideas of ragas, sharing your ideas of talas. The Mridangam artist, they given their ideas of talas and enhance the performance. So you work as a democratic unit in a very objective way to give the art to an audience who will also be an objective kind of audience, and then go back home, it becomes subjective. You try to analyze what went right in this concert, what went wrong in this concert, try to improve yourself on what went wrong, what went right, try to stick to it and become your own best version of yourself.
Very interesting.
Okay.
No issues. So, so in the previous conversations, we were talking about how Western music relies on written notations and written scores. How important are those for Carnatic music? Or do they even exist? Can Carnatic music exist without written notations or written scores as such in today's time and age?
In today's time, probably notations are important. It's much sought after by the students. With my limited experience as a teacher. But earlier, I can safely say that music has existed without notations. So the writing notations for Carnatic Kritis is a very modern concept. Probably in the early 1900s or late 1800s it started. And even today, I would say that each artist has their own way of writing notations. The swaras, they have the same syllables wherever we go. It's Sarigama Padani. And the ragas, they have the same names wherever we go. But the way we write certain notations, it will differ. Because I have tried to read other people's notations, and some things don't make sense to me in my way of things. Similarly, my notations may not make sense to a third person. But in Western music, it's the opposite. If a score is written for a Beethoven's piece, for a Mozart sonata or whatever it is, it will be read by any Western classical musician in any part of the world. So they will be able to look at the notation and play the exact same way. But in music, in our music, it's different. Notation writing is again a very subjective art form according to me, but it can be generalized to a large extent. So I can share the notation that I've written and it can make sense to you. There will be some doubts which we can clear on a personal one-on-one session. But notation is a very scientific and an important tool for a student to understand classical music today. As I said, it gives a lot of discipline to your learning as a musician, as a student, because you have to learn how to write a notation for a Carnatic Kriti, for a Varnam, for a Tilana and everything, because it helps you understand the in and out of a Kriti, how a Kriti functions. You cannot write notation for a Raga Alapana. You cannot write notation for Kalpana Swaram or Neraval. Those are created in the spot. But to get to that level of creating certain on the spot, you need to master the notation learning first, learning comes first,
Yeah.
and then learning becomes permanent if you have a notation or notated script.
Yeah.
And singing what you have learned and looking at the notation and making that notation go to your heart, getting it by heart, that's what makes you a performer. That's what pushes you to create and teaches you what to do and what not to do in a concert.
So now I have one more question. So based on so we spoke about kalpana and kalpitam, and we also spoke about objectivity and subjectivity, right? So would you say that somewhere, so you were saying that from kalpitam stems kalpana, you have to master kalpitam
Absolutely.
first in order to be able to execute the art of kalpana well. So would you say that's universal across all kinds of music, or would you say this concept of getting objectivity right and then moving on to the art of subjectivity is purely a construct that exists in the Indian classical music?
Indian classical music mainly. I don't think this kind of sophistication of lessons it can be compared with any other form of music of the world,
Right.
because our music is so rich and it's so unique in the sense that you may have heard people say that, oh, Indian classical music, you need to have a certain inclination to even learn or even
Yes.
to enjoy it, to listen to it, to appreciate it. You need some musical sense. So that's what we are talking about. That's the unique aspect of Indian classical music. I'm not saying that it's very hard to understand classical music without any background. No, that's not what I'm saying. Anyone can appreciate any art form, any music form of the world. They
Right.
just need to have an open heart, an open mind, open ears. That's it. If they go to a concert with a closed mind, saying that this music won't appeal to me, naturally it's not going to appeal to them.
Fair.
But Carnatic music, it will help a great deal if you are able to catch certain basic concepts of raga, tala,
Right.
the different types of swaras in every raga, the Chatushruti, Shatshruti, Pratimadhyam, Shuddhamadhyamam, Sadharana Gandharam, Antara Gandharam. So each raga has a different structure because of its frequency points, the different swaras in the raga. So for you to get into that world, you need to invest a little time into it, and that's what I say that's what I mean when I talk about, if the artist and the student, if they are able to start subjectively learning everything and then begin to have an objective view of the whole music form, it will help a great regard. So I think Carnatic music, Indian classical music in that sense, is very unique because you need to follow your classroom lessons first,
Right.
put in hours of practice, and then start creating, improvising on what you have learned,
Interesting.
and then that's where your performance career lies.
Great, great. Thank you, sir.
So I
Thank you
hope
so much.
we had a nice conversation on text and performance in Indian music, and how text and performance are both very essential for a performer as well as a student of music.
Definitely.
So thank you for watching this conversation. I hope we have made certain points about Carnatic music clearer to you, and looking forward to meeting you all in a concert very soon in the future. Namaste.